This is a lemon meringue tart from 3 Michelin-star chef Thomas Keller. And in today's episode, we're gonna make this in our home kitchen. I love lemon meringue. I grew up with it. It's tart from the lemon custard, a bit of sweetness from the meringue on top. I think it's a perfect dessert, and we're gonna do something a little bit special with this one, so watch until the end. Let's start making the pie dough. We're gonna make it right from scratch. You can buy this, but it is a lot better if you make it from scratch. We're gonna start by measuring out our dry ingredients. Medium-sized bowl. And actually I need my scale because it's always easier to measure this stuff by weight than it is by volume. Start out with some all-purpose flour. Add some icing sugar. It says to sift it. I guess I probably should have done that with the flour too, but whatever. I'm gonna use some oat flour. I use a whisk to combine all of these dry ingredients. Set this aside. Into the bowl of the mixer, I'm gonna add a bunch of room temperature butter. Mix this on medium-low speed. This looks pretty good. We want it to look sort of like mayonnaise. So now I'm gonna add powdered sugar. This is separate from what I mixed a few minutes ago. Start on low speed here. If you start on sort of the medium speed, which we're gonna get up to, everything's just gonna fly everywhere. Scrape in the seeds from half a vanilla pod. Mix this for another second so everything's combined. So now I'm gonna add the dry ingredients in 2 different steps. I'm gonna add half of it and then mix and then add another half. You really don't want to overmix the dough at this point. We're just trying to get things basically so the flour and this butter mixture is all incorporated. Back onto low. And then add our second half. And last but not least, I'm gonna add in some egg. It's still sort of crumbly, but it is starting to come together. Okay, onto here. I'm gonna use the heel of my hand, start smearing the butter into the flour, and this is gonna start coming together into a dough. I'm just gonna form each of these into a rectangle. Wrap them both in plastic wrap. So that's the first step of our lemon meringue tart. That's gonna rest for about 2 hours. While it's resting, that gives us time to make our lemon curd. We need gelatin, cold water. We'll set this aside. It's no surprise, but our lemon curd is gonna feature lemons. Add in some white sugar. Combine everything. 2 eggs. Bring it to a simmer. Be real careful here. We don't want those eggs to overcook. So we're getting pretty close to a simmer. I'm gonna whisk this constantly for about 3 minutes. If you find it's getting too hot, you can just pull it off of the heat, keep whisking, and then put it back on the heat. This has thickened up a fair bit. Let's take it off of the heat. I'm just gonna keep whisking this, release some of the steam, and to let it cool down a bit for about another minute or so. Take my gelatin, squeeze out the water, and then right into my lemon curd. Whisk it all together. Then I'm adding cubes of butter into the lemon curd and then blending it until it's combined, until all of my butter is in. Blend it together. So the last thing I'm gonna do is add a bit of lemon zest. And then I'm just gonna stir this to incorporate the zest. I can smell this from here. I need to try it. Oh, good Lord, this is gonna be good. This just needs to come to room temperature before we can use it in our tart. So let's set this aside. So you might be thinking at this point, Matt, you've got everything you need to make your lemon tarts. Well, no, actually we're missing 2 things. We need to make the meringue. but we also need to make a cake. We're gonna top it off with a piece of Madeline cake. Madeleines, if you're familiar with them, they're those little cookies, those little soft, fluffy French cookies. They're fantastic. They're one of my favorite things in the entire world. But we're gonna make a cake with a similar type recipe, then that's gonna go on top, and then our meringue is gonna go on top of that. We need to make a cake. Okay, so I'm gonna start with a bowl and a sieve, a bit of all-purpose flour. Actually, I need my scale. Add in my flour. Then just a very little bit of baking powder. It weighs like 1.5 grams, so my scale isn't strong enough to detect that, so I'm gonna do it by volume. Sieve that through. Set this aside. Now in the bowl of my stand mixer, I'm going to add some white sugar and my egg. Okay, I'm gonna start by mixing the egg and the sugar together for about a minute. Now I'm gonna increase the speed and whip this on medium for about 5 minutes. So after 5 minutes, gonna scrape down the sides of the bowl, up this to medium high, and another 5 minutes of whisking. This looks pretty good. It's thickened a little bit, but it's still light and airy. So we'll set this aside. And I'm supposed to use glucose syrup, but I couldn't find that anywhere. I guess I could use corn syrup, but I really can't even find that where I live. I'm going to use agave syrup. Basically, we're just looking to amp up some of the sugar in here. So I'm gonna melt butter with the agave. Okay, I've got my melted butter and agave syrup. I'm gonna add a little bit of milk. Now this is a really important part. I need this to cool down because I'm gonna add the egg mixture into here. If this is too hot, it's gonna cook and scramble those eggs. I'm gonna let this sit for a few minutes. I'm gonna add about 1/4 of my egg mixture into this glucose and butter mixture. And then whisk in some lemon juice. I'll set this aside. Get my egg mixture. So I'm gonna add half of this, fold it together. Most of the flour is incorporated, add the other half. And then in 4 parts, I'm gonna add my glucose mixture into my eggs, or whatever this is now, my batter. Once it's completely incorporated, add another 1/4. Fold this together. I'm going to pour my batter into here. Spread it out. Put this in the oven for about 10 minutes. This looks pretty good. It's just starting to brown on the outsides. Very, very little color on the top. We're gonna let it cool down completely before we move on to our next step. So we're almost there. We only have 2 more steps. We need to make our meringue, and then we need to put everything together. So let's start off by making our meringue. Actually, on second thought, let's make the mold for our tart because we need to basically par bake so that they're set and they form. And then while those are baking, we can make our meringue. Shells first, then meringue. So I've got a few different ring molds. I think I'm gonna use this one. It's the largest. This is about the height I want. If I use this, I've sort of got to fill it halfway up, and maybe this one's a little bit better, but yeah, let's make a larger one. I think that'll photograph nicer for the thumbnail. Before I go too far, I need to cut out a piece of my cake because I want it to be this size, and if I start putting the mold in here, I'm gonna forget to do that, so let's do that first. This is my cake. Let's cut a piece here. Don't need to take it out yet, I just need to make sure that I have the size that I want. Perfect. So my dough has been in the fridge for a couple of hours. Take some parchment paper, fold this over, start pounding the dough. Working from one side to the other and then back. And then I'm gonna start rolling the dough out from the center to the edges. Press down, trying to get into the corners. Get rid of my excess dough, and then just fix any holes. This should be on a tray. All right, so tip number 1 is make sure you put that on a tray right away. Don't do what I just did. Everything's saved. We're able to just patch where it broke as I moved it. A little bit more parchment paper. And then I'm gonna fill this with rice. That's gonna weigh this down, so when it blind bakes, it's gonna set in the shape that we want. Put this in the oven for 8 minutes. Well, 16 minutes, but 8 minutes, and then I'm gonna rotate it. That leaves us enough time to make our meringue. We're gonna use a 2-to-1 ratio of egg whites to sugar. So I've got 80 grams of egg white. That means 160 grams of sugar. Some water that's come to a simmer. I'm gonna put my bowl on top, and I'm gonna start whisking the sugar and the egg whites together. We want all of the sugar to be dissolved in this. We can check by just rubbing a bit between our fingers, and we don't feel any of the sugar crystals. Then I'm gonna whip this until stiff peaks form, probably about 10 minutes. After about 10 minutes or so, you should have something that's shiny, glossy, and that holds stiff peaks. The last thing that we can do is create a couple of makeshift piping bags for both our lemon curd and the meringue we just made. So let's put our meringue in here. Okay, I'll set this aside. And I'm gonna do the same thing with the lemon curd. Okay, move this down into the corner. You can see how this becomes a piping bag. When I'm ready, I'm gonna snip this off, and then I have a piping bag. Our dough came out of the oven about 5 minutes or so ago. It's got to cool to room temperature, so that's, probably gonna take another 10 or 15 minutes. So we'll jump back here as soon as that's cool. Okay, this is our pastry tart. Now we should be able to just run the tip of a paring knife just to separate everything. There we go. Now I've got my layer of the Madeline cake. So then lastly, I'm gonna pipe on my meringue. And then just using my spatula, I'm gonna shape this to the edge and create like a little peak on top. The last thing I'm gonna do, the thing I said at the beginning to wait for, I'm gonna use my blowtorch and just create some color on this meringue. This is optional. You could eat this this is pretty fun. This looks really, really pretty. The meringue turned out really well. Try cutting this in half maybe to start. And you can see the different layers, the lemon, the cake, the meringue. It looks really nice. So let's give this a try. It's incredibly good. I love lemon. It's really tart. The meringue is sweet, but it's not too sweet. Charring it on top gives it that sort of unique taste. And the Madeline cake in the center is a really nice, different texture. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Look how crazy this is. This meringue is so tall, and the dough is really good as well. That's fantastic.